And maybe we could just also, Rajni, just a note to Councillor Fletcher for her to rejoin. There she is.
I think you're fine. It's live now. Can go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So we're back in open session and moving to item 12, which is the approval of the closed session decisions. Anjali, could I have the first motion, please? So this motion having been discussed in closed session, could I have a mover and a seconder? The first item being the authorization to begin preliminary negotiations with TSHC on the functional service delivery agreement that will outline the terms and conditions under which TSHC will purchase service from TSHC will purchase service from TSHC. And then the second resolution to authorize the transitional lead and chief corporate officer to enter into preliminary negotiations with TSHC on the lease agreement for the operation of the 83 seniors designated building. So may I have a motion?
So moved, Carrie.
Carrie, thank you. Seconder?
Seconded by Warren.
Thank you, Warren. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. That takes us to the item number 13, the approval of the public meeting minutes of November 23rd. We again have a resolution. First of all, can I have a motion, and who would like to move the adoption of the minutes?
I so move, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Warren. Seconder?
I'll second. It's Linda.
Thank you. Any errors, omissions, or all in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Thank you. That takes us to item 15, which is the action items report. The board will recall that at the last meeting, we agreed that the action items, which we had actually been tracking since our first meeting, would be included on a regular basis as a specific agenda item. And so this is the first time we are doing that, including all of the action items from June until our November meeting. We have a request for deputation from Mr. Bill Lohman. And Mr. Lohman, are you with us?
I am.
Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Madam Grandmother, Mr. Sherrar, and members of the senior board. Thank you for the opportunity to address the board this morning. I'm speaking on item 15 in the action item list. I do have a couple of questions about the list, and I'm seeking a little bit of clarity about the written deputations. The way it was worded, it's not clear whether the deputations are actually being provided to members in advance of the meetings. And then there was also the question in regards to the list of outstanding questions that from Mr. Meeks, whether that list was actually circulated to all board members. And then I guess to that, have you heard any response to that submission from Toronto Housing at all? And then there's also the questions about the working group. Are you aware of any movement to accommodate tenant inclusion? basically, I've changed a little bit here. At the top of the priority list for seniors is a renewed sense of promise and to restore the well-being of senior tenants by reconnecting them to their community engagement and their recreational activities. And this continued isolation just further escalates detrimental effects to mental wellness, and not to mention the increased staffing needs and the expenses that will occur over the long term. And a cogent argument can be made that the focus of the staff has been on implementing and validating the accountability framework of the integrated service model, not engaging and including the needs of the isolated seniors who have been cooped up for more than 3 years. And it's because seniors have had serious issues with the engagement refresh, and nothing has been done over the past 3 years to address or mitigate any of those senior concerns. At the past June meeting, staff stated that a conversation was needed to be had with staff members about what would become of the stack in December. What would be the next steps? Should stack continue past June 1? What will its role be going forward? Do we keep the same members? That follow-up conversation never occurred. Yesterday was the final meeting for more than one half of the stack members, and it's the assertive and questioning members who are being retired. Really kind of makes you wonder if the aim is really to add new voices or get rid of the questioning ones. Honestly, to me, it felt more like a forced retirement or a thank you for attending a focus group, not a city-appointed voices of seniors over a past year. And there's a certain finality, to the thank you and goodbye. We were left with no idea about the stack, what's going to be happening to it. Nothing about new members. No, we want to keep in touch with you. No mention of a letter of appreciation. But honestly, much has been accomplished this year with a good deal of work. And there is a lot to be thankful for. But there's still a lot that needs to be done. And I am glad that this board is aware of that and is working towards that end. But this is a season of togetherness. And so I really want to wish you all a joyful and happy holidays. And I would hope that we can make a New Year's resolution to focus on inclusion and improving and empowering the lives of senior communities to come out of the isolation of the past and into a future hopeful spirit of wellness for seniors in the new seniors community. Thank you for your time this morning, and happy holidays to you all.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lohman. And let me just address your first 3 points before I ask other members of the board if they have any questions. Just on the point about deputations being pre-circulated, if a deputation, that the policy that TSHC had for deputations, which we have adopted pending with basically very little modification pending becoming a corporate operating in June, is that we deputations that are received 3 days in advance would be circulated to enable information to be obtained, etc., to inform the discussion. Your deputation and that did come in yesterday was circulated to all members of the board yesterday. But so if it's in advance, it will be circulated. The second question about your very important effort to pull together all of the input on issues that were outstanding has indeed been circulated to the board and is informing work that is being done by the management team at the moment, and will inform very much the work that is done by the Quality and Tenant Engagement Committee once they begin in January. And your last point about the work group, I realized when you asked the question that perhaps the wording was not clear. The tenant member of the work group is a tenant member of the board, and rather than a non-board member. So that wasn't very clear, and thank you for pointing that out, and we'll make sure that that is clear as we move forward. So with that, I'd like to ask if there are any other questions or any questions for Mr. Lohman. Councillor Fletcher?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Lohman. Just you mentioned that I don't think the tenant engagement system. Can you tell me what your issue is there, please? The tenant engagement at the moment?
Well, primarily the issue is that the seniors were not involved in its development at all. And we have protested that from the very beginning, that there was no effort to include the needs that seniors have that are different from other folks. And so, yes.
So there was an input from the seniors as to the model. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. There was no input to the model, and every attempt to provide access was dismissed.
So you would advise the corporation?
Yes, by the refresh folks, and that went down through staff, and basically seniors were told that this is not for you. You will get your own. So it was been kind of left like that, and we've had no voice since our councils were shut down in June of 2019.
Okay, thank you for that information. So you'd be suggesting that should be reviewed by this new corporation as to whether or not that tenant engagement system is the one that best serves senior tenants. Would I be right to say that?
Yes, Councillor Fletcher.
Okay.
I would agree with that. Seniors really need to be involved in in shaping the engagement that will be most conducive to our changing needs.
And as far as the stack is concerned, do you think the stack should continue during this time?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
Do you think it should just have the membership refreshed?
Well, I believe that my issue here is that there is no discussion again with the stack members about the stack committee. It was a unitary decision made by staff. There's 6 months until the new corporation. Is it wise to dismiss those who have been involved and bring new people in who know nothing at this juncture? And I mean, so there's questions about how the stack was used, but I think there's real value in the stack, and I think that going forward it could be a real useful avenue for seniors to have a voice.
So Bill, the stack was set up under Tenants First, and the city set up the stack, and then at some point it was transferred over to TSHC. Would you support having the city take back the stack as a kind of overarching tenant focus group for all of the work that would be taking place in this transition?
Yes, yes, I would.
Thank you.
I think because there's a bit of convolution between what Tenants First had, what Tenants First was envisioning, and what the senior services and long-term care envision. And I believe that this transfer has altered the intent, and certainly it has changed what seniors believe they are supposed to be receiving. And so I believe that it does need to it does need to be put into perspective so that it can be an effective vehicle.
Thank you.
Thank you
Um,
very much, Bill, for that. I'll take that under advisement at City Council.
Thank you. Just any further question for Mr. Lohman, and we'll save the discussion of the tenant input to that item on the agenda. But Brenda, any
Yes.
discussion
Thank you.
question for?
Mr. Lohman, you mentioned here in talking about the wellness hubs being put on hold, but deals and arrangements with agencies continue being struck with outside agencies. Can you tell me a little more detail of that? Is this universal? Is it happening in different buildings, or it is just, give me the idea of the scope when you say that arrangements have been made?
Thank you for the question, Director Paris. Yes, there are different things that are going on. There is the hub model itself.
Right.
And so that is being put on hold. But the process in which the hub was put together, and that is a conflict for tenants, that process is continuing in with other buildings and other buildings that are potential hub buildings. That there continues to be conversations with Toronto Housing and agencies about the use of these, of tenants' common spaces. And again, we go right back to the same issue. Tenants are not involved in that discussion about what is occurring in their own building. And decisions are being made that, well, basically that part of our lease is being removed.
And how many locations are you referring to when you say things are proceeding?
Well, my understanding is that this is an overall policy that's being implemented in all of the buildings. And for some of us, it raises questions about why we continue to be locked out of our recreation rooms, while we know that family buildings, that they are open and they are being used by tenants. But we are, for some reason, we are being told you have no right to that space anymore, and that the agencies are the ones who will be deciding how those rooms get used and what will be offered.
Can you name names?
Quite clearly, excuse me?
Can you name names of the agencies that you think are being?
I'm sorry, I don't
I'm
think.
just trying to get, I understand, Madam Chair. I'm just trying to get a sense of the scope of this problem. So
I think, Brenda, I don't think it's fair to ask Mr. Lohman that detailed question. He's giving you his best understanding, but I really don't think that's a fair question for him.
okay.
That would be a question that would be directed to Jaypreet Kohli, who is the seniors manager in charge of agencies and the engagement. But I've heard from other tenant leaders that the agencies that are being directed towards their buildings are basically being informed the same way, that they are in charge, not tenants.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Carrie?
Thank you, Maureen. Bill, it's Carrie McNeil. I'm one of the tenant directors, and I totally support your comments. And I think it's important for the rest of my colleagues to know that at the same time that agencies are kind of moving in, the process for tenants to use their own space has become overly complicated. And I wonder if you have experienced that, where what used to be a simple procedure to ask your superintendent if a meeting can be held when the space is open, now requires multiple approvals over sometimes a couple of weeks. Have you experienced that?
Well, not directly recently because our recreation rooms have
Of
been
course.
closed.
Yeah.
But I did do a barbecue back in early October, and I was not able to access the recreation room where supplies were kept.
Yeah.
And I was told that I had to wait until an agency came in that morning to do its exercise program before I could get my platters to put the food
Yeah.
on. So it used to be a 3-page process that you filled out for use, and then after that it's now a 10-page. And it used to be that you would just go and you would just deal with your CSC and the super, who would make arrangements to assure that the room was vacant. And now it's a process where it's totally removed from anybody in the building.
Yeah.
It's all being done through one individual who's making the decisions about every building, and that would be Mr. Coley.
Yeah, and the use of the common space is part of tenants' lease agreements and is supposed to be available for tenants, and that's being removed.
That is correct. It was my lease states that access to these common spaces is part of my lease. Yeah. But it does stipulate in there that it is a co-use between the tenants and the needs of Toronto housing and agencies that may be coming in. But this is basically just it's just basically striking that part of my lease, and there's a real issue there.
Thanks, Mr. Lohman. Linda, did you have a question?
Yeah, I'll be really quick, and maybe it's an ask to Michael and team, because I think that Bill is, and thank you, Bill. You have an ability to actually raise the issues that are really timely and central. We have, right now, actually looking at space and all of the agreements that we're doing. I would just ask that staff really take this point. 2 things into mind right now: the importance of actually the isolation that seniors are feeling because they actually need to be in contact with one another. So some, quickly addressing that. But as we go forward, I think that the message that we're getting from Mr. Lohman and other tenants is how important it is for them to know that they have access to space, and that the systems are not cumbersome, so that they would actually prevent people from actually accessing the space that is clearly in their domain. And this is an interesting time as we try to actually figure out the agencies and this new model of care. We want to actually have embedded supports, but it shouldn't be at a cost of also having space that actually promotes reduction of social isolation.
Thanks very much, Linda.
Can I suggest that Paul Johnson, the DCM, reports back on this to the board about this access, please? Maureen, thank you so much.
Fletcher, can I defer that until we get into the...
Why?
Because
it's just a request. It's just a request. It's not a motion. Based on that issue of space, which Linda has now spoken about, just makes sense just to ask the DCM to have a look at that. That's it. It's an undertaking, not a motion, Chair. I'm sure you're aware of those.
Paul, did you address?
Yeah, through the chair, happy to take that away and have a conversation with both the seniors housing units and JAG and Michael when we meet regularly. I think it would be good to get the whole context back about how those decisions are made and the processes and what possible changes are coming as we move out of this.
Right.
At some stage, we're going to move out of this pandemic, so we'll do that. And I think it'd be good to get that collective piece of information back. So I'm happy to coordinate that.
Great.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Lohman, and very best wishes to you and yours for the holiday season. And I'm sure we'll see you again in the new year.
Thank you very much. Have a wonderful holidays, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Before we move ahead, I have to move us back. I jumped over the approval of the closed session minutes. of November 23rd. Are there any errors or omissions? And if not, can I have a motion to adopt them?
So moved by Paul Ainsley.
Thank you. Seconder?
Warren seconds.
Warren, thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Thank you. Okay, Michael, your transitional lead report.
Thank you very much, Maureen. And I just want to start by addressing Mr. Lohman's comments and his deputation today, and the input that he has provided at this board prior, as I committed to reporting back to the board on those issues. Mr. Lohman has raised a number of concerns, and I'll just address some of them now in terms of our work in response to those. Just on the issue of STAC, as you may be aware, the Senior Tenant Advisory Committee is an advisory committee which was set up in an agreement between direction from the City of Toronto to Toronto Community Housing. And there is a clear accountability framework for the STAC, including reference and membership and terms and all those kinds of things. And just my understanding for the benefit of this board is that STAC was intended to provide the implementation of the new integrated service model. And as we'll hear later on, we have taken the opportunity, which has been a good opportunity, is to engage the Senior Tenants Advisory Committee on issues of transition in addition to the integrated service model. And I certainly have appreciate the concerns that Mr. Lohman has raised. We've referred those back to the city, and as I understand it, there's been quite a bit of discussion between Mr. Lohman and the city and with Toronto Community Housing with respect to the future of STAC and any changes to those terms of reference. But as it stands, as I understand it, the terms of reference are that STAC should be in place until the end of next year, subject to any changes. So as my understanding is that it will be in place through the transition and beyond. And I hope will be very helpful in providing advice to Toronto Community Housing in terms of the work that they're doing now, but also to us as a new corporation starting up. So I'm very hopeful that that work will continue. On the issue of the space, which is one of the issues that Mr. Lohman raised today, this will be a very important issue for the new corporation, because when we undertake to lease these 83 designated seniors buildings, all of those spaces will be under that lease. And so the issue of how those spaces are used, how we engage tenants in the future development of uses for those spaces, all of that, I think, will be a core part of what the new corporation will be doing, because that work will be central to our work in terms of making sure that seniors have the services and that their needs are met. So I think it's a very important discussion for the new corporation going forward as we take over the lease of those buildings. And I'm certainly well aware and appreciate the interests of tenants in that and in their tenancy agreement with respect to those spaces as being part of course, a critical part of working with the new corporation in the future evolution of how those spaces are used. And so really appreciate, Mr. Lohman bringing that very important issue. Many of the other operational issues that Mr. Lohman has raised, and you have seen in set of documents that he provided, and we've circulated to the board. We have referred to Toronto Community Housing and Seniors Housing Unit staff there, but also very useful information for us as we think about the role of the new corporation, the work of the new corporation in continuing to strengthen supports and services for seniors tenants. Just a few other things, Maureen, I'd like to just focus on in terms of the work that we're undertaking, and you're seeing much of it today. But I just want to take the opportunity to thank our own staff at Toronto Seniors Housing, the staff at Toronto Community Housing, and the city staff who are providing terrific support. And I think we're making very good progress. Very much on track towards achieving the milestones that we need to achieve so that we can have a smooth and efficient transfer of operations from Toronto Community Housing to our new corporation on June 1st of next year. We have, because of now that a lot of the detailed work being done on a number of issues that you're seeing today, and we'll see at subsequent board meetings, hired some new additional staff to the transition team. They're working under the transition team that you see at our board meetings. But those staff are helping us with the detailed work of planning and the work with Toronto Community Housing to ensure those plans are of high quality and are going to work effectively for that June 1st transition. We have entered into a formal non-disclosure agreement with Toronto Community Housing, which has allowed us to receive all of the documents that we feel we will need to help our work and planning together. And so we're in receipt of a great deal of documentation that's going to help us really dive down into the work that we need to do to plan for the transition. With respect to staff, I have held town halls with staff of the Seniors Housing Unit. Really thank the Toronto staff for helping to organize those town halls so that I could meet the staff that will be transferring to the new corporation. I was very pleased with the opportunity to do that, and have met with specifically with our the union partners, who are the representatives of the locals of the two major union groups. And again, those meetings were positive, and pleased to have the opportunity to meet with them in terms of the work going ahead. So with that, Maureen, I'm happy to answer questions, and of course we'll have some of the specific details within the reports that are coming up in the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Any questions for Michael? Brenda?
Yes, thank you. With respect to STAC, the gentleman said it was being retired in December. I'm not quite clear of the detail. Is it going to be transitioning new members, or are they phasing it out? Like, what exactly is the context here?
My understanding, Brenda, is that it's not, the STAC is not being retired, but there is some turnover in terms of members. And as I understand it, they're in the process of receiving expressions of interest, and I believe some of those are from existing members. And then there'll be a process, as I understand it, with Toronto Community Housing to select the membership such that will be in place for the coming year. My understanding that the current terms of reference have a STAC in place until December of next year.
I'm just concerned about institutional memory. it's always important to have continuity. And there's any way we can influence. I'm very concerned about the silencing effect, which is something I keep on hearing repeating. And I know all about silencing effects. So is there some way that we can put a pause, and I would perhaps direct this to Mr. Johnson, who I think is off now, to any of these turnovers, recommended new participants, because we're entering a period when we're going to be needing some tenant input, and we have a structure in place that obviously needs some improving, but I don't want to throw the bath. I mix my metaphors. I don't want to throw it out and lose the institutional memory of consistent members. So I don't know who to direct this to, but I think it's important. Either we put a pause on some of this or make very clear that we don't want this total changeover to occur in the moment of important sensitivity and important progress. I'm trying to extract some sort of level of input from people.
Paul, would you like to address that?
Sure, and through the chair, the line of questioning is great. I do want to give some assurances. The process of renewal of membership is not a forcing of others to leave in order that others come on. It is an opportunity for people both to step away should they have other interests and other things they wish to do, as well as inviting new people to join. I'm happy to take away as we look at this membership piece. So we are encouraging people, and existing members can ask to stay on and put their name forward again, but happy to take away how we would better balance your comment about the institutional memory and the continued piece, particularly through this transition period. I mean, we're in a situation here where there is a real need for this, I think, to continue in some form that is a partnership through at least until next summer, and perhaps further. But so I'll take that away and talk with the team around it, both our senior services team as well as the seniors housing unit within TSHC, because I think there's ways that we can do that. But I don't want to leave the impression at all that this was a turnover that is a forced turnover by rule. It's not. It can have same members come back. But I think that the message maybe out there is that that's not what is hoped by this. And I think, you know, that's what we need to change for sure. And we've got plenty of time to do that. We have not made the membership decisions as of yet.
And linked to that, the issue of outside agencies. I know we've put pause on hubs, but I'm wondering, linked to this whole discussion is before we engage in agreements with social service agencies who make long-term decisions as well, is there any way that we can put some sort of, I don't know, pause to some of that? Because I think we really need to grab hold of this integrated service management model and what it really means in practicality. Those are my comments. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Paul?
Certainly through the chair, I think it'd be a two-step piece. We'll take those comments. Certainly, Michael and I have heard that loud and clear. But I think what would be good is to have that fulsome presentation on exactly what those look like. What I wouldn't want to do is by saying, "Yep, we'll just pause it," we actually take away something that people want. So, you know, I think there's a balance here of understanding what that program looks like. Michael and I clearly have heard both the deputant and the comments of members of the board, and happy to get a quick report back and chance for you to understand how this works now and exactly what's going on in the buildings, and then have some of that further discussion about whether there's some additional advice that follows.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I need to move us forward.
No,
Councillor.
sorry, I'm going to have something to say, Maureen. I'm sorry, very quickly. Thank you so much. I haven't spoken yet. I've just advised you, Brenda, that I'm going to be putting a motion to City Council about the stack and making sure that it is back under tenants first and meeting the needs of tenants as well as the corporations and being a good advisor, first of all. So based on this conversation and many others that I've heard, I also need to understand, Mr. Paul, that this board and this agency is not making any agreements. All of the agreements around use of space are all through TSHC and the seniors housing unit. But what we don't have is a list or anything to know what those are and what kind of obligations will be undertaken.
Yes.
Nor is the city services or city services being used in our own city-owned corporation. That's unclear to me too. I'm not sure that they are. So I think you've raised a really important point, Brenda, that we should ensure that there's a good match for everything. And I do know tenants are going to legal clinics to find out what their relationship is to the public space, because
Oh,
they
there you
feel
are.
like that's been lost.
Yep.
So
There
that's
you
all.
are.
Thank you so much, Maureen,
Thank
for
you
letting
for
me
that.
speak.
Thanks very much, Councillor Fletcher. Okay, any other questions for Michael from his report? Okay, thank you very much, Michael, and thank you, Paul, for your undertakings to follow up, and we look forward to hearing back from you on that in the new year. So that takes us to item, just a minute, the item 17,
17,
the membership of the Joint Transition Work Group. As you know, we agreed at the last meeting with the terms of reference for the Joint Board TSHC Joint Board Work Group on transition, and I undertook to come back with the proposed membership at this meeting. I have asked Warren Law to serve and Carrie McNeil to serve. Warren, in light of his role as the chair of the Corporate Governance and Human Resource Committee and the numerous issues that will be addressed there, and Carrie as the tenant member from TSHC board on the work group. So happy to answer any questions, but I would like a motion to approve this.
Speaker.
Brenda, thank you.
Just a quick question. Is this in addition to the joint work, Michael, that you've been doing with your respective colleagues? I'm not quite clear in my mind where this group fits in.
I can do that, Maureen, if you like.
Yes, fine. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Brenda. So this was the idea that stemmed from meetings we had with Toronto Community Housing, that we set up a joint board work group that would allow for essentially JAG and I to report to a group of directors from both corporations, not in the sense of providing direction to us, but as a sounding board for the work that we're doing. And there was agreement from both boards to do that. And this is the last step of that in approving the membership. Now, the approval at Toronto Community Housing was slated to occur at the last board meeting.
Right.
In fact, it got deferred because of a time issue at the end of the meeting, unfortunately. So I'm still trying to confirm with Toronto Community Housing with respect to their approval of this, but subject to both boards' approval, the idea is that we would have the group, the members from each board form this work group, and once approved by both boards, we could get it up and running and have the ability to talk about the issues of transition with that work group.
And they'll have decision-making authority?
No, they will not have decision-making authority.
Okay.
All of the decisions must be made at both boards independently.
Thank you.
Brenda, that's a specific component of the terms of reference.
Yeah, I was just trying to remember in my mind. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks. So did someone else, Councillor Fletcher?
Yes, I did. I really think Brenda should be on that transition or that committee, just because she's so clear on tenant issues, and she's just very, very clear and brings up the right issues, I think, regularly, looking at the relationships between this board, this corporation, the other corporation. She's got a lot of experience in these type of organizations in service delivery. And I think I would like to move that if Brenda would do that, either add somebody on there. And I'm a little concerned that I just am concerned about what started off today at our meeting. And I just think we have to have someone who's got a really broad spectrum approach to the future seniors corporation and integrated services. So I would really ask that we go back and consider that, and that we defer this time, Maureen, because there isn't anything done yet, apparently, at TSHC. So there's nothing to meet with. So I think we should go back and have that conversation. And I think that Michael should have that as well with the deputy city manager and the tenants first team, as I'm sure they've had that conversation at the other side. So that would be my motion, to just defer this decision until the next board meeting and ask you to relook at that. Thank you.
Is there a seconder for Councillor Fletcher's motion? Jim?
I'll second Paul. Or sorry, I'll defer to Jim.
I'm sorry. Jim, are you seconding that motion?
I am. I was muted.
Okay.
I
We saw your finger.
Because it affects the sound quality.
Oh,
Is there any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? Carried. All right, we'll defer this until the
Thank you.
until the next meeting in January.
thank you, Paul.
Okay, we now, we are, as I mentioned at the outset, we're moving item 18, the project status report, to the end of the agenda. So that takes us to item 19. Michael, the corporate office.
Yes, thank you, Maureen. So this item is for your approval and something that I've mentioned which is the consideration of a corporate office for Toronto Seniors Housing Corporation. And you'll see in the report that following substantial discussions with Toronto Community Housing Corporation and looking at the opportunities within the current portfolio of buildings, that we are recommending that the board approve the office space at 423 Yonge Street, which is one of the seniors buildings called College View Apartments, as the corporate office for Toronto Seniors Housing Corporation. And we've listed within the report there the benefits of having the corporate office there. I think from the main perspective of, and the reason that we're providing this recommendation is that we do, if possible, have the corporate office within the seniors housing buildings. I think that will be very helpful in terms of visibility and accountability for the management of Toronto Seniors Housing Corporation with the people that they serve, which is Toronto Seniors tenants. The opportunity with this particular building is that the second floor of that building has been reserved for office space for some time, and was actually in the process of renovation for Toronto Seniors Housing Unit prior to the launch of the new corporation. So in looking at the opportunities that we had discussions with the Toronto Community Housing team, particularly around the second phase of that renovation, which was planned for that space to complete the renovation for office space, with the question as to whether that could be slightly modified to support having the corporate office in that location. So we undertook planning, Toronto Community Housing team, And they recently reported back to us, and it's the reason the motion is coming this morning, that yes, indeed, that the plans for having a corporate office there could be met within the context of the plans, the broader plans for that office space for Toronto community housing. The other context piece that allows for this is that the seniors housing unit within Toronto community housing was undergoing a change in how the back office services were provided towards supporting seniors to a more regional model. So there were a number of the staff who were located in that building who either have already moved out or will be moving out into regional offices so that they could be closer to the tenants that they serve. So that was another opportunity that enabled this for looking at what we would need as a corporation to have this as a corporate office. So the plans are complete, and you can see in the attachments there is a presentation which I won't go through, but just shows you a sense of what that space will look like and a proposed floor plan. So as you can see, it's one floor. That second floor, approximately half of that renovation, as I say, was already completed under phase one. Some modifications to the phase two, and Toronto Community Housing confirming with me that they have the approval in place to complete that. So that leads to the motion this morning, Madam Chair, to ask for approval that we select that location for our corporate office.
Thanks very much, Michael. Carrie?
Yeah, a comment and a question. It's a 20-story building, not a 10-story building, as indicated. Anyone who's ever been there knows with 3 elevators, you wait an eternity to get upstairs. So just that point. And Michael, you mentioned shared desk spaces. Are you referring to TSHC staff that may work from home on different days and come into the office on different days, or are those shared spaces with TSHC?
Though no, the former. And firstly, I'll correct the error in the report, and thank you for raising that.
Okay.
No, this will be for staff in our corporation. There won't be Toronto Community Housing
Okay, so
staff there.
Our office will be enclosed. Our office will
Correct.
be complete. Okay,
Yes, correct.
great. Thank you.
No,
Further
just for our
question
staff.
on the shared space. What staff are you envisioning using this location?
This will be the leadership of the new corporation, the leadership team of the new corporation, and the staff. I think largely the back office staff and some of the staff that are already within the seniors housing unit who will remain in that location. It will generally be that mixture of staff, and we've looked at the plans for what we think we will need as a new corporation. We've worked with the Toronto Community Housing team around the current needs of the seniors housing unit, and we feel that those together we will be able to adequately house for their work in this space.
Thank you.
Question about that.
Linda, and then Councillor Fletcher. Linda?
Yeah, thank you, Maureen, and thank you, Michael. I really like the idea of the office being located in one of the seniors buildings, and I actually particularly like that it's being located there. I've been in that building, and it's already kind of an illustration of an integrated model. We have actually agencies that work there. My question is, when you're doing the renovations to the space that's already been, the tenants are used to actually having some staff there. It's actually a very unique building. It's kind of like this office right in the middle of the building. Will there be some benefits to the tenants in doing some of the renovations? I did, it's like many of our buildings, it's not the newest building. The elevators are not great. like elevators are, if there could be some benefit to actually a little bit of a refresh for the tenants and just making sure that. But I think the message that we got previously for corporate offices was that when the corporation is just sitting in a corporate office, you get detached from the core business. And I just really think that it's great to actually be in the core business and people actually running into tenants every day, which is actually great, and you'll get that voice.
Maybe if I could, Madam Chair, just quickly respond. I really appreciate the comments, Linda. We want to ensure that we continually improve and work with Toronto Community Housing to continually improve the quality of these buildings. I think it will be very good that our leadership team sees that every day in terms of what some of the challenges are. There is, within actually the office space there on the second floor, there is space for seeing tenants, and actually we're looking, we're going to be refurbishing that space and making sure it works well for tenants. But I think more broadly, I hope by having the corporate office in one of the buildings that will be an impetus for continual improvement in all of the buildings, including that one.
And accessibility.
Councillor Fletcher.
Yes, thank you. Just establishing that the kind of the operational people, at what level will they be there, who would be there, and to establish clearly that the executive leadership team will be reestablished with the CEO. So we're making, I'll call that an interim situation, Michael, rather than the permanent one. Is that correct? And I'll also ask the deputy city manager that same question.
Sorry, I don't understand the question. Sorry,
well,
Councillor.
We're setting something up there for a certain number of staff, including the leadership team, understanding that that's an interim situation because we're hiring a new CEO who may have the same leadership team, a different leadership team, different positions. So I'm just being clear with that from the board's point of view, that that's how we're proceeding.
Yes, maybe if I could, Madam Chair,
So,
this isn't for the interim team. This will be completed by approximately the time of transition. This is our best estimate based on our planning of the space required for the new team and the work that's going to go on there. So
understood,
yes,
but this is an interim team. So the permanent one, I think the board needs to understand a new CEO may configure things a little differently. That's all the point I'm making here. Would you, I think that's the case. So we're
just confirm though that this space is intended for the permanent staff. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Understanding
and the configuration of such, Michael's doing that, and then new CEO, there might be a different configuration. But yes, it's where the permanent staff will work out of for the seniors corporation. Got it. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, could I have a motion to approve this is a very exciting motion in terms of when we actually get to meet. Be it resolved that the Board of Directors approve 423 Yonge Street to be the Toronto Seniors Housing Corporation corporate head office. Could I have a motion?
I so move.
Jim, thank you. Seconder, Brenda?
Brenda.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. That's a very important decision, and we will get there one day soon, hopefully. Thank you. Item 20, Norm, the financial results.
Thank you, and good morning. The financial results are have been included in your package, and it really includes two key items. One is the results through November, 1 month to go, and we've incurred expenditures of around $515,000. And the nature and type of expenses that have been incurred continue to be the same. And the second item within this briefing note is with respect to the year-end external audit. So as you'll recall, KPMG was appointed the auditor of this corporation back in September. And I've had some conversations with KPMG in terms of the audit process. And given, pardon me, given the small expenditure level this year, it was their recommendation that the audit findings report would come forward when the audit is complete. Next year, you'll have a much larger organization and cost structure. So the auditors will come forward first with a plan for their audit, and then they'll come forward at the end with the results of their audit. This year, because we'll have spent less than, probably $800,000, their recommendation is that the plan and the report come back together. This is quite consistent with startups where the spending is small. That's how I have done the last couple of startups that I've been involved with. The city needs the draft statements in early March. And so we have communicated with the auditors, and they are prepared to come to the February 23rd board meeting to present their results of the audit for fiscal 2021. So that's the report. I'd be glad to answer any questions on this particular document.
Thanks very much, Norm. Any questions for Norm? No? Okay, Norm, I think you can move on now to the item 21, the approval of the budget.
Thank you.
22 transition budget and 2022 budget.
Right. So thank you. So this particular document has two motions attached to it. One with respect to the transition budget, which is from January 1 to the end of May. And the second is what I call incremental budget, or the actual operating budget, which would take place from June 1 onwards. What I will do is take each one, Madam Chair, in order, and then perhaps would you like to do motion at a time or do the whole thing all at once?
I think maybe if you do a motion, do each one in turn, that would be helpful.
Okay, thank you. So the first motion has to do with the transition budget and the approval of an expenditure budget of 2.831 million. This amount and the categorization and description of costs hasn't changed from what you saw last month. We have had a chance to discuss this with the city, and in the intervening period, they have forwarded a memorandum of understanding and a business case, which we have incorporated into this briefing package. And we have been informed that subject to board approval, that they're quite anxious to get this MOU signed. And the MOU does obligate us to a number of things, including when the money will come. So it'll be one-time funding. One payment will occur. This funding will extend through December. So we have the opportunity to spend these funds on transition startup funds activities through the end of December. Any funds that are unspent would be returned to the city. Clearly, we would only use the funds for which it's intended purpose. And then there are some reporting requirements, quarterly reporting requirements in this particular MOU. And so the expenditure is reflected on page 98, $2.8 million. Salaries and wages, benefits, a large component for services, which are the interim implementation team, that is growing, as Michael referred to earlier, and a contingency amount. And so it is a total of 2.8 million. And the motion is for to be resolved that the board approve this 2022 transition budget in the amount of 2.8 million. Authorize both the chair and the interim transition lead and chief corporate officer to sign off on the transition operating funding support document, which is in effect the MOU that I referred to earlier. So I'd be happy to answer any questions with respect to the motion that's in front of you.
I just have one question, Madam Chair. Thank you. It's just to Deputy City Manager, just to make sure that we don't have scope creep in the budget. Is this what was anticipated in all the discussions for this new corporation in setting everything up?
Yeah, so through the chair, there's ongoing conversations with our budget folks, and yeah, so nothing here that is unexpected. And then you've received other information about how we're also working through the financial elements of what will come post this 6-month period in terms of finishing off this year and setting it up for success in the future. So all within the range that is be expected for this transition period.
Thank you. That was my question.
Madam Chair?
Sorry, I'm sorry, I put myself on mute here and Brenda.
Quick question. What is the fiscal year we operate under? Is it April 1 to March?
No, it's a calendar year.
The calendar year. Oh, okay. And the funds that are not spent will be returned. Is that the general principle we operate under? So going forward after this transition period?
My understanding is that at the Toronto Community Housing, ongoing operations, that funds provided are not clawed back, with the exception of the reconciliation process that occurs with the subsidy.
And what does that mean, the reconciliation process that occurs with the subsidy?
Well,
meaning if we don't spend it, we return it?
At Toronto Community Housing, between the city and that organization, and likely with us, the funds are delivered, and then throughout the year, I think it's either on a quarterly or annual basis,
Right.
there's a reconciliation of funds that were delivered, for example, for
Yeah.
which there was a vacant unit during that period, that year, right? So there's an adjustment for vacancy throughout the year. But if the organization had permanent or timing differences that generated surpluses,
Yeah.
then those funds would remain have remained with Toronto Community Housing.
Toronto Community Housing. Okay. And then going forward, we get is it a subsidy, or what's the word we use? The money we get from the City of Toronto to manage operations.
Well, the funds from the city are
Yeah.
called a subsidy, my
Okay.
understanding, and that subsidy to Toronto Community Housing for the entire operation is about $250 million. And so we'll see a portion of that based upon our tenancy.
Okay. Okay. So our money flows through TCHC?
No, it will flow through us.
Okay.
Right.
I understand.
But the
Okay.
budget for 2022
Yes.
has been established through them, and then there'll be a partitioning of
Yes,
us.
understand. Okay.
And
And the other revenue we get is tenant rental income and stuff like that.
correct, and there's some other ancillary activity depending upon in certain buildings. I gather there might be some commercial activity as well.
Maybe some commercial lease income.
Correct.
Okay, thanks very much. Any other questions for Norm?
I just want to clarify, not a question for Norm, but clarify for the board that every budget, all the spending, everything is approved by the city.
Yes.
Every penny. So this board doesn't have, there's usually no problem, but
Yeah.
that is the way that works, because sometimes I think we forget that. But I just thought I'd mention that again. Thank you.
Yeah, good point.
So we have a motion on this transition budget first, and then we'll go to the permanent. Norm has already reviewed the motion. Do I have a mover and a seconder?
I'll move, Brenda.
Brenda, thank you. Seconder?
Seconded, Carrie.
Carrie, thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. All right, Norm, on to the 2022 incremental budget.
Thank you. So this one is a little less clear because we're still working with the city. So we have produced a budget based upon our understanding of costs and what we will be dealing with on a go-forward basis. And like the first item, the 2.8 million, this 7.595 million is the same number as you saw last month. We have had discussions with the city, and my understanding, and Michael can correct me here, is that this particular element of the budget will, as we roll out and understand more, go forward to the city sometime in the spring for finalization, along with some other related seniors housing unit spend. And so it's really our best understanding of what the costs might be on a go-forward basis with all the assumptions that are included. And so this motion is really to for your awareness that we are working through this and that we would formally present this to the city, but that we would be obviously working with them through the city to resolve what the final will be, and that we would bring that budget back for approval. And certainly there would be a lot of discussion between now and then. And I would imagine that would come forward in the early spring on either a March or April meeting, once it's been presented and understood at council. So that's where we stand now. And this last piece in terms of how it might be dealt with in the spring is something that I've just gained to understand in the last week or so. So the motion is for you to essentially say that we would submit this, which in effect we have, not formally, but informally, and with discussions with the city finance group, and that we would bring it back once it's finalized. And there's a whole host of assumptions, including all the shared services discussions with Toronto Community Housing and with the city. But this is our best understanding, what we think we will need to stand the organization up, with some incremental FTEs, some of which will be in our new location on Yonge Street on a go-forward basis. So I'd be pleased to answer any questions, and perhaps, Michael, if there's anything you want to add ahead of time.
Michael?
Nothing really. I think Norma's laid it out. Yes, this is essentially a planning budget. And this authorizes us to, as we've already been doing informally, work closely with the city, and this will have to be approved at the city, after which it'll come back in terms of what that final amount is for the balance of the year after the June 1st transition.
Great, thank you. So any further questions for Norm on this incremental budget?
Just a quick one. This includes all the operation costs of the buildings and.
No, this just
No.
is the incremental costs
Okay.
to stand the organization up. So
Yeah, I understand. Thank you.
more to come.
No further questions for Norm?
No.
Okay, so Norm has reviewed the motion. Could we have it, please?
So move, Brenda.
Brenda's moving the resolution as proposed. Seconder? Do I have a seconder? I can't see. Harry, I see you. Would you like to second it?
Of course.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Terrific. Well, this gives us a very solid foundation from which to both operate between now and June 1st, and also a very good starting point for discussion with the city going forward. And Norm, thanks for all your work on this. I know it's been not only putting together this budget, but also learning the process and working with the city. And we really, really appreciate your efforts in this regard. So thank you.
Thank you. It is a team effort.
Great, thank you.
Thank
Norm's
you
the
very much.
man.
Okay, that takes us to item 22, the tenant input plan for transition. And we have Arlene Howells making a presentation. Arlene?
Hi, good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to present to the board. I've been listening to the very passionate conversations this morning and the deputation that was brought forward by Mr. Lohman.
Sorry, I forgot. We have a deputation.
You have a deputation?
I'm sorry. Rajni, could you get Ms. Kohesi?
Ms. Glosey, go ahead. Thank you, Rajni, and thank you all of the members of the board for allowing me a few minutes this morning. My deputation is in regards to Arlene's report, the tenant input plan for transition. And the area that I'm looking at is in my document, it's the bottom of page 62 and the top of 63. And it describes the scope of the plan and what it includes and what is out of the scope. And I'd like to see some changes made to that if the board deems that it's the right thing to do. As far as the scope, what it includes, it says service delivery activities related to tenant-facing programs. Pretty much everything is a tenant-facing issue or program. And I feel that the way it's worded there is reducing it to certain things that it's reducing it so that very important things are excluded. So that wording needs to change. Tenant-facing programs is a term that is probably right out of the TSHC handbook. That's what they use to limit our information gathering. As far as out of scope, it says operational issues, property, home, tenancy, maintenance, or security. These are all, again, issues that are directly have an impact on tenants. And I know that you don't want to be hearing things like someone's tap is leaking or their lawn wasn't cut on time. But the operational issues involve the staffing, they involve the contractors. These are all things that tenants have something to say on. I think what would be better, instead of having the scope described in this way, would be to say that the scope should involve everything that the transitional work groups are going through hand in hand in time. If you're talking about the shared services of a certain department, then the focus group should be about that, because that way you can get our input and then it can be taken to the board with all of the other input. We need to be part of this transition as it's happening. We don't want to talk about how nice it might look in the first 100 days. We want to be part of this planning as it's going along. Okay, now back to the out of scope. It says implementation of the TSHC tenant engagement system. Now, I understand that you don't want to hear anything else, and neither do I, in regards to Toronto Housing's current tenant engagement refresh. To me, that doesn't involve seniors buildings and hasn't already for at least a year and a half. So I don't want to talk about that. But there is a part of this that is rather frightening to me, and that is that they are still developing little components and calling it tenant engagement and weaving it into the ISM. So I think we have to be very careful with that, because it's going to make it much more difficult to unweave it when we move into the new corporation. It's part of this is related to the use of space that Bill was referring to. They've hired 4 new staff that they're calling tenant engagement staff to go through use of space agreements. As far as I know, they are hiring or have already hired 4 new, what they're calling tenant engagement staff to work in each of the regions. This is involving building space. This is involving decisions around service providers, and they're all calling it under the tenant engagement umbrella. So if we're not going to talk about tenant engagement, they have to stop escalating these positions and hiring positions and calling them tenant engagement and weaving them into the ISM. They've even got shirts on their supervisors that say tenant engagement and support for positions that have absolutely nothing to do with tenant engagement. So we really have to take a good look at that. Again, probably a lot of this is going back to the SHU and Jaipreet Kohli's decisions, and it needs to be visited. So that's about all I have to say. One last statement just in regards to Michael. Thank you for your report on 423 Yonge Street. I just hope that if both corporations are using the same floor, that there are really clear definitions of what back office services are.
Thank you.
And that's it for me today.
Thanks very much, Ms. Kohesi. Are there any questions for Ms. Kohesi? Carrie?
Yeah, just a point. Hello, Maureen. Thank you for that.
Hi, Carrie.
A point on the out of scope. At our last meeting, I made the motion and it passed that anything and everything connected to the transition, except for board confidential matters, is of concern to tenants and needs to have tenant inclusion. So we simply cannot label something out of scope.
Thank you.
Other
questions? And Arlene has all of focus dates and rough dates lined in, but we need to broaden what's being talked about in those focus groups.
Other questions for Ms. Kohesi?
I have a question.
Just a quick question, Maureen. The under the planned activities, I'm asking the deputant here. These update pulse check focus group. Are you understanding where you think the tenant input should be? Is it at every one of these steps, or I'm not quite clear your visioning here.
Well, right now the focus groups are talking about tenant-facing activities or tenant-facing programs. That kind of relegates us to, do we want skipping class or do we want a health education class? We want to be part of the transition.
Okay.
So when I look at your timeline around shared service review and agreements, we don't know what's going on. And I don't expect to be privy to confidentiality or confidential reports. And I appreciate the non-disclosure agreement. But there are working groups in multiple areas that are taking place that are coming up with plans that they will then bring to the boards for final decisions. We need to be working more in line or in alignment with these working groups as they're happening, so that the topics we discuss in the focus groups are the same topics that are being discussed amongst these other working groups, so that our piece can be included with their piece.
Okay, thank you very much then.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it
Absolutely.
does.
Thank you. Councillor Fletcher?
Yes, I wasn't clear on why you said we didn't want to hear about tenant engagement, the current tenant engagement, Maureen. Could you be a little clearer with that for me, please?
Well, in Arlene's report, out of scope, it lists implementation of the TSHC tenant engagement system. Now, I would have to assume that
Sorry?
Out of scope. It's not part of the communication plan with tenants.
It's on page 123 of your package, Councillor Fletcher.
Or 113.
I'm just asking her. Thanks.
113.
113, I'm sorry. Yes.
Do you think that's okay, or do you think that the current, how tenants are going to be engaged as part of the work of hearing from tenants. Sorry, in the stack.
Sorry, could you say that just a little bit louder? I can't.
I know it's being proposed as being out of scope, but are you suggesting that we should be aware of the current tenant engagement system, whether it's been looked at by tenant leaders in the stack, or whether or not it should proceed or be paused or anything like that? Would you want to give us advice, or you feel you can't give us advice?
No, I think Michael's made it clear that we're not going to be covering the tenant engagement system as it stands, as it has always stood within Toronto Housing. That's their program. You know, hopefully the new corporation will be developing its own program around tenant engagement. What I'm saying is that Toronto Housing is continuing to develop their tenant engagement system within the SHU, and I believe that should be stopped.
Yeah.
Thank you. I just want to ask you,
discussed.
thank you, Maureen. Are you aware, I'm sure you are, because you've been on this since the beginning, that Tenants First is a city council directed program with a number of components, including setting up a new seniors authority, 483B,
Right.
correct? We all agree on that.
Yeah.
And that part of Tenants First, part of their deep role is tenant engagement and ensuring that tenant engagement is being done well at Toronto Community Housing and at Toronto Seniors Housing Corporation. Would you agree? So they're really, I think you're saying somehow that Tenants First, the city, needs to be advised that there's some concern here, that this corporation can't interfere, but the city, as the sponsor, sorry, is that you, Warren? Sorry. That the city, as the sponsor of Tenants First, can certainly hear those things, and it's not out of scope for Tenants First.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
I did make an inquiry. I made an inquiry with Tenants First, saying how did the scope of the stack get reduced from what's it say here? From the Seniors Housing Corporation to the ISM. And Tenants First just bounced me off to SSLTC, where they said that they felt that their interpretation was an appropriate interpretation, where I feel it should have stayed with Tenants First direction.
Thank you, Maureen.
Thanks. Are there any further questions for Ms. Classy? All right, well, thank you so much for bringing this to our attention. This is very helpful input as we begin our discussion of the tenant input plan for transition. And Michael, I think just before Arlene presents the proposed approach, can you just remind the board of the rationale for the out of scope, including implementation of the TSHC tenant engagement system, because I think that will help position the conversation.
Yes, as we've discussed at previous board meetings, our recommendation from management has been that we want as much tenant input on the transition work as we can achieve, and we think it's very important. We think that the best way to do that is through the current mechanisms that are available to us for Toronto community housing tenants, and seniors tenants are tenants of that corporation at the moment. So the basis of the recommendation around the issue on tenant engagement system at Toronto Community Housing Corporation is that our recommendation is that we believe we will find good mechanisms for getting the input that we'll need and that tenants want to provide to us on the issues that are important for us in going through transition and thinking about beyond. The tenant engagement system is a major program at Toronto Community Housing, and we're recommending that we use the opportunities that we have available through that those mechanisms.
Thank you.
I'd like to
So-
speak, Maureen. Thank you.
Councillor
When the
Fletcher,
time comes. Thanks so
Thank you.
much.
thank you. So Arlene, and I know a number of people will want to speak on this. So Arlene, would you go ahead with your presentation now?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So I appreciate Ms. Kohesi coming forward with her deputation, which is very important in raising the scope issue. And as Michael has said, we are working within the constructs of working with Toronto Community Housing and the channels and venues that they have available for us to engage with their tenants. So our work is trying to leverage what is available through Toronto Community Housing and also introducing some new mechanisms such as focus groups with them to tap into the various opportunities to speak with tenants. The tenant engagement input plan that is in front of the board was reviewed with tenants on the 29th of November. And it received 100% approval from the tenants who were in attendance. 6 of those that attended were staff members. And the feedback we received was that they were very much in favor of moving forward with the plan that would include the voice of staff members. It would include the voice of tenant leaders, and it would also include the voice of tenants at large when we can leverage opportunities within which to do so. We had that first focus group with tenants in November to get approval for this input plan. Then we had another focus group last night to get input on the CEO profile, which I presume many of you may have had an opportunity to also provide input on. These are very important junctures within the conversation with all stakeholders around how the corporation moves forward on engagement with tenants, external stakeholders, and employees alike. We are also planning, per the plan, we will be having another set of focus groups coming up in January to talk about the first 100 days. And that first 100-day conversation is focused on the delivery of programs and services that were identified in the tenant engagement survey that was administered by Toronto Community Housing, and the report was filed in, I believe it was late August, using the data that was based on responses from senior tenants as well as tenants across the system for Toronto Community Housing. That data will inform the focus of the 100-day embarkment of Toronto Seniors Housing. So what I mean is that there are some pretty big issues that tenants have already identified that are important to them. And we're taking back those issues back to tenants and saying, what you have identified as important, can you help us prioritize so that we can sharpen our focus on some of the key things that are important to you, like pest control, like maintenance, like parking, like a variety of issues that are very much focused in the way we will deliver service, and what they would like to see changed. Recognizing that, of course, we cannot change much or any of those things in 100 days, but it will give us an opportunity to sharpen our focus based on tenant input as to what they would like us to focus on. We are planning those focus groups for the end of January. And as with all of this, we are looking for every opportunity we can to involve tenants as much as possible. Working with the team at TCH, they are looking to create additional opportunities. In the plan, we had actually only contemplated 2 opportunities where we thought we would have to be able to speak with tenants either through STAC or an ISM engagement or through a focus group. And we're now looking at potentially expanding that to have regional opportunities where all 4 regions, tenants advisors, and staff members would have an opportunity to contribute. So in our engagement approach, we are looking to get as broad a scope of tenant engagement as possible using the mechanisms that are currently available to us. So that means going to every staff meeting. It means going to every ISM meeting. And it also means creating focus groups where specific topics that we wish, that we believe tenant input would really be valuable in, we are using those opportunities to get tenant voices into the conversation as much as possible. I'm just going to pause there for a moment just to see if there are any questions. I believe Councillor Fletcher had indicated that she might have a comment or question.
So you finished your presentation?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, thank you. First of all, any questions for Arlene?
Just have a question for you, Madam Chair. I don't understand why that presentation wasn't made first and then we had questions. That's unclear to me. That's kind of the standard way of doing
I'm
things.
sorry, I don't understand your
Well,
question.
to have Arlene present the report, and then we would have our questions and discussion, because we had quite a bit of, oh, we did that around the deputant. Anyway, sorry, I think other people have questions and I'll carry on after that.
But did you have a question now that Arlene has finished her
I see
presentation?
Brenda has a question. I'm happy to let her go first.
Okay, thank you. May I just in the interest of getting everybody involved, Brenda, if you don't mind, I'll take Carrie's question first, then Brenda, then Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you so much, Maureen, and thank you, Arlene. A couple of points. As you're talking about the planned activities, I'm going to push, and I think most of the engaged tenants would say this, they have to be more involved in the creation of the agendas. Tenants do not want input on agendas that have already been created. So I think their voices have to be sought, and I agree, there has to be as much done as possible to try to get as many tenants interested in this so that they can be involved. But tenants have to be driving the agenda. And I understand yours and Michael's comments about the predicament we find ourselves in regarding the TSHC tenant engagement plan. I would just to use Brenda's example of not misusing these next 6 months to sort of do nothing. I think we still have to gather really critical information on tenant thoughts around the tenant engagement system, what systems might be preferable, even though we won't be implementing something new. I think we have to gather that information in the next 6 months so that we don't get to June and say, now what? And the other thing, and this is a real bug with me, and it's not your fault, Arlene, but just as we stopped saying feedback and exchange that for input, which is very much appreciated, I'd like us to stop using the term elected tenant leaders and instead use building representatives, because they are not elected tenant leaders. There haven't been elections for tenant leaders in more than 4 years. It might be, it's around that time, but they are people who came forward in buildings and said, oh, I'll do that. But elected tenant leaders gives the impression that there was sort of a building-wide election and these leaders are the result, and it's simply not true.
I'm sorry, Carrie, what was the term you were preferring?
Instead of elected tenant leaders, building representatives.
Building representatives. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Carrie. Brenda?
2 comments. It won't happen today, but if I could suggest, Madam Chair, I think we need to have a period of time as a board to discuss this whole issue of tenant engagement and what we mean by it and what we would like. I'm struck by how limited a model that people are working with. There's lots of ways to do tenant engagement, and including even building management by tenants, which is often used in other jurisdictions. So I think we keep on going around and around about deficiencies, et cetera, but I think the core issue is, what do we really mean by tenant engagement and how best to do it, and what model could possibly be implemented going forward. Secondly, following from Carrie's point about language, and it's a suggestion. I don't mean to offend anyone here, but that last paragraph prior to bringing this plan forward to the board, I want to give my idea of perception and tone. And I've had this happen so many times when you engage with frontline people or tenants or clients, and there's often a criticism that, well, they're not really involved. You have here a description of a meeting where you imply unwittingly 68 were invited, 12 replied, 10 attended, and only 6 of them were staff. Now, the tone of that implies almost a diminishment. And I think it's so important, because this has often been criticized by tenants of the TSHC, how they're treated, the tone that's used. This feels and sounds like a critique that tenants are not coming to meetings. I would have a grave question about process. When were they told of the meeting? Were they told of the context? Did enough people have enough time to make a decision to attend? So I don't mean for you to answer that, you know, it's not meant as a critique, but to please understand that when you start doing numbers like that, you're trying to attach unwittingly, I think, almost a critique about tenant involvement. And I think things like this we have to be mindful of. Okay. And I know you use language a certain way, and you know, every sector has different language, but you know, update and pulse check has, you know, it has no meaning for me. Pulse check sounds too much like bafflegab, and I think if it sounds that way to me, God help you what it sounds like to the tenants. And I know you're trying to make a distinction between content and form in those meetings, but language is key, perception is key, process is key as we go forward on this tenant engagement, please. And please, I really think we need to spend some time as a group understanding what we really mean by tenant engagement. That's all.
If I may, Brenda, just on your first point about understanding what we mean by tenant engagement. As you know, we have established a Quality and Tenant Engagement Committee of the board.
Yeah.
Will begin work in January, and the core part of its mandate is to both understand and define what it means in future and bring that to the board over time. So this will be a very deep dive for that committee over the coming months.
Great.
To establish our approach to tenant engagement and tenant input as we look forward.
And is that clearly understood in the terms of reference?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
As long as we do it.
Yeah. Okay. And Arlene, just do you want to respond to the points that Brenda made about the last paragraph there?
About updates, pulse checks, and
yeah, I don't mean to put you on the spot, Arlene. It's just from my experience.
I just wanted to give you, if you wanted to say anything about that, Arlene, I just wanted to give you the opportunity to do so.
Yeah. Oh, I appreciate the feedback, Brenda. I think it's important to always keep in mind how information is perceived when it may not be intended in a pejorative way. So I appreciate that feedback. Thank you.
Councillor Fletcher?
Yes, I'm just wondering on the phrase elected tenant reps, where, Arlene, where you got that. Did you get that from Toronto Community Housing?
It is the term that is used at Toronto Community Housing, yes.
Okay.
Leaders.
And do we have something previously about that system that was reported here, and actually the number of tenant reps that or building reps that have been put in place compared to the number that are supposed to be in place? I thought we had that. Perhaps that could be brought forward so everyone can see the state of that current tenant engagement that we've heard a lot about from our deputants, and I want to thank them for bringing that up, and also our directors who are also tenants. So that's one thing. And second, I just wanted to, I believe that while it might be out of scope for this board, I think, Michael, you've heard that enough times, or Arlene, you've heard that enough times, that might be something that you would indicate you should refer to the Tenants First team or back to the city, because you're hearing that a lot from tenants constantly here at this board. Would you not agree you're hearing that a lot? And might be out of scope. What do you do with something out of scope? I would say you send it upstairs to have a look.
Michael, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, happy to do that, Councillor Fletcher. I think the city staff are aware, but I will indicate again through the city with respect to the things that we hear through deputations.
So it's out of our board scope, but it's not out of your scope to raise that issue because we've heard that so many times.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And then just there was a board direction. I'm unclear. Some members think there was a board direction around the CEO search that Stack be the conduit for that consultation, but I'm unclear, and I'd like to have that clarified today, please.
Sorry, what is the question, Councillor Fletcher?
At our CEO search, we're talking about who to go and talk to, that there was
yeah.
a board direction to go to the stack to have a conversation or the consultation with the recruiter. Maybe I'm wrong, but I've heard that a few times, and I'd like to be really clear on that, please.
I'm happy
Marlene?
to answer that.
Michael, sure.
Madam Chair.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that, Councillor Fletcher. We understood that through the CEO search work group, and we appreciate that desire to get tenant input for the CEO search, and that the direction that Stack should be engaged in that. With the tenant work that we were doing in providing input onto the transition, we had already started to invite other tenants to those sessions with respect to the tenant input plan and with respect to the issues that we were already engaging. So when this was organized for the CEO search, I undertook to say, yes, let's continue in that direction, where I felt we were following the direction that Stack be engaged, but other members were coming to those sessions, and I undertook that that could continue to happen. I didn't take the interpretation from the board that only Stack and no other tenants should be involved in the input to the CEO search, and so that was my decision, Councillor Fletcher.
So just clearing though, you're not, here we go. That I just want to be clear, since we're not using motions in that committee, but I'm going to be clear, I will be making motions there, so we're clear on direction. I had understood that was the direction from the CEO search committee, that it be staff that would be the consultative group for the CEO search. And I'm asking you now, Maureen, to confirm that, please.
My understanding was that it was to be Stack, but I also understand that we would not want to preclude others who are interested. As it did turn out last night, it was all Stack members were invited, only Stack, as well as others, only Stack members did attend. So the outcome was as you would have hoped for.
Sorry, I guess we need to clarify that direction by the CEO search committee. And of course, that was last night's meeting, but there had been a previous meeting that was a consultation for the CEO. Was there not, on a different night?
No, there was not. That was postponed to last night. So, Councillor Fletcher.
Oh, I see. So there was that was last night's meeting. Okay, good to hear that. Thank you. But I just want to be clear on what the direction was, and perhaps we should have motions there so we can be clear.
It also points to the need for continuity on that Stack membership. So it gets back to the.
I just want to be clear.
You know,
I didn't make that motion. I think Carrie made that motion at the committee because we did have. I see. There was a meeting to be held. I'm sorry, I can't let this go. Was there not a meeting that was going to be held with the recruiter before last night? Yes or no? Sorry.
Councillor Fletcher, the meeting was last night.
Was there not one that was set up previously with the recruiter, Michael?
It was to be held last Thursday. It was because of lack of response. It was postponed to last night. And last night, all of the participants who were there were Stack members.
But the last Thursday meeting, for which there was a call out, was a very broad call out of, was it 68 people, whoever, not just Stack. I think, Maureen, I'm really trying to make a point.
You made your point, I think, Councillor Fletcher. We'll go back at the CEO search group.
Right.
We will discuss this again, but to assure you that Stack were the participants in the meeting last night.
And that there were no staff on the call. Because
that's
that
correct.
Was a question as to whether they would be there or not. I had to talk about that yesterday.
Yeah, and you were advised that yesterday that there were no staff in attendance.
Yes, that's correct. But I'm just being clear on tenant engagement, which is really and truly big tenant engagement, the CEO. Let's be really clear about what's happened. Thank you very much.
Let's
And
mean what we say and say what we mean.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So this, excuse me, thank you all for your input on this. I think it's extremely helpful for Michael and Arlene as they move forward with the process. Sorry. We'll go back, we'll have further discussion. I think the key point is that we have succeeded in getting tenant input from STAC in the CEO search, and I understand directly. I asked Jason, the search firm leader, to let me know, and he did through Arlene last night. They received excellent input, some very good ideas from the STAC members, and they were extremely pleased with that focus group.
I have a
So,
motion, Maureen, when you're finished. Thanks.
Okay, what is your motion, Councillor?
My motion is that this board requests that STAC have input in creating the agenda for tenant engagement, the agendas for tenant engagement.
Can I have a seconder for Councillor Fletcher's motion?
Carrie, second. Carrie.
Thanks, Carrie. I think that would be supported by all, but is there any further discussion? That's certainly consistent with my understanding, and I think that's the understanding of all of our colleagues. So all in favor?
Can I just be clear what Helen or somebody's written down? I want to be really clear on that, so we don't have to come back and say I said something different. Who's
Okay,
keeping those
can I
notes,
ask,
Maureen?
Anjali, could you just give us the motion that you have recorded for Councillor Fletcher? Jelly?
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry,
Noise.
I'm not sure what's happening there.
What's happening? Yeah.
Councillor Fletcher, could you repeat your motion? And
Well, I'm not sure who's taking it, Chair.
and Jelly is taking it. And Jelly, who is both running the process, bringing forward the motions for us as we go through, and she is the recording secretary. So could you just repeat your motion?
Yes, the Board of Directors of Toronto Seniors Housing Corporation requests that the STAC have input into all agendas regarding tenant engagement prior to the meetings.
Yep.
Thank you. And Carrie seconded that motion.
I just need to hear it read back by our secretary. Thanks, Maureen.
Hello, this is Anjali. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, I was having some technical issues. So I confirm I have the resolution here, and it says, be it resolved that Board of Directors of TSHC request the STAC have input on all agenda in tenant engagement prior to the meetings.
Maureen, can I just ask a clarification question, which I think might be helpful?
Sure.
I presume, Councillor Fletcher, you mean the agendas with respect to the work that we are requesting input on, not their regular agendas with Toronto
I'm talking,
Community Housing.
no, I think generally that needs to be that conversation around anything to do with tenant engagement and how that's going to proceed. And here's the agenda for this many people, this, that, and the rest of it. It's quite clear to me that that conversation hasn't taken place with STAC. So
Toronto
that is my
Community Housing
intent.
responsibility to set the overall agendas for STAC, not our responsibility.
Well,
but what
I
we
am,
can have
you
input
know what?
to.
I'm going to make the same motion at council. So our board can be very clear that we can ask Toronto Community Housing for this. We can ask the city for this, but our board can have a position, period, full stop, in my opinion, unless it's ruled otherwise.
It is a process question too. You don't ask people to meet.
Councillor Fletcher, Michael has been very clear that, excuse me, our tenant input or transition plan has to be conducted through TSHC.
So then I suggest changing the motion. This board requests, I don't know, maybe Paul should let us know who we're requesting to, the tenants first team, that the STAC have input mean, these are our future tenants. This is, there's ways to get here and there's ways to stop it happening. And I prefer to find a way to make it happen rather than to stop it happening. And I think I'm a little frustrated that it's always, you can't. Let's find a way to make this clear of the expectation of this board, which will be taking on all of the tenants in a number of months.
Yeah.
So I'm looking for language that would help us here.
Yeah.
I guess my
Perhaps-
question of
All right.
clarification is with respect to, I'm happy for us to take on the responsibility that the agendas associated with the input that we're requesting and work with tenants on behalf of the work, that part of the agenda. Happy to do that in terms of working with the tenants on those parts of those agendas. But the general agenda is a matter between Toronto Community Housing and the City of Toronto.
So I think that we can have an opinion because Arlene's just described a whole number of tenant engagement moments.
That's right.
Where there's going to be this, there's going to be that, there's going to be all this big rollout. And although we don't have tenants, we can have an opinion that the rollout of all of that tenant engagement, we can request the deputy city manager to ensure that STAC have input into all the agendas for the tenant engagement rollout. That's very clear. If you'd like to do it like that. I mean, we're looking for the way to have an opinion, but the way not to have an opinion. I'm not looking for how not to have an opinion. I'm looking for a way for us to have an opinion based on everything we've heard.
Okay,
and I think the board is going to be supportive of that. So let's get some wording we can work with. Would you like
So if
that
I
going
might,
to
Madam
you,
Chair,
Paul?
to be helpful, I think it would be it is completely appropriate for this board to advise the City of Toronto of any concerns it has with respect to those issues that are between the City of Toronto and Toronto Community Housing.
So we'll do
including
that
this.
then. We'll request the deputy city manager of the City of Toronto to ensure that STAC have input into the creation of the agendas related to tenant engagement activities.
Okay, I think where some confusion is coming up is that we did change that to tenant input.
Yes.
Yeah.
No,
Versus
no,
tenant.
the whole
May I just
tenant
stop you?
engagement. No, Carrie. This is
Yeah.
all the rollout that Helene has just discussed.
Yeah.
I stop you for a moment, please. And Angeli, could you please bring the resolution up on the screen?
Sorry, Madam Chair, this was not on the
Okay.
presentation. So what I have is
Right. I'm going to try and parse it into 2 points.
Thank you.
Number one is that this board, as Councillor Fletcher has moved, that this board requests that STAC be involved in establishing the tenant engagement on all matters related to the transition plan, tenant input on the transition plan. Secondly, that the board bring to the attention of the deputy city manager the concerns expressed with respect to the TCHC overall engagement plan for consideration by TCHC and the city.
Well, no, I didn't move that.
Well, Councillor Fletcher, we cannot assume responsibility for you as a director of TCHC may wish to raise this with the board of TCHC. We cannot take responsibility.
I'm sending it to the deputy city manager, period. That was my motion. It's going to the deputy city manager to indicate that we would like to have STAC have input, and you said it very eloquently at the beginning, into the agendas or the rollout of the tenant engagement plan related to the ISM and the Seniors Corporation. I'm not going to say anything about TCHC. I'm saying that's to the deputy city manager to take under advisement. And then they can do whatever he would need to do. We're just doing our due diligence. Having heard a lot, we're flagging it to the shareholder, and we can do that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Fletcher. So with that.
That's my motion.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. Is there a seconder for Councillor Fletcher's motion?
Oh, Carrie.
Carrie?
Sure.
All right. Is there any further discussion? All right.
I just have to say, I'm a little concerned that we feel
Councillor
that there's no
Fletcher, we are
pathway.
coming to the end of our meeting, and I want this motion to be addressed. All in favor?
Recorded vote.
Recorded vote.
Correct.
Councillor Fletcher, Brenda Paris, Carrie McNeil, Jim Meeks, Linda Jackson. I don't see Warren and Lawrence. Are you in favor?
Warren's here.
Lawrence?
I have no problem with your motion.
Okay, thank you. Lawrence, you're in favor? Any
I don't
opposed?
know. He didn't say he was in favor. You got to
Lawrence?
declare. You can't
Lawrence?
say somebody's in favor. They have to declare it.
Lawrence?
And it's in favor, not I have no problem. Come on, Maureen. There's a way to do a recorded vote. And actually, the secretary should do the recorded vote.
Councillor Fletcher, would you let me take this vote, please?
Maureen, I'm challenging. It is up to the secretary, the board corporate secretary, to take recorded votes, not the chair. And there's a particular way you do a recorded vote, and you say in favor or opposed, not I have no problem with the motion.
Councillor Fletcher, please. Lawrence, I'm going to do this again for clarity. All in favor, please raise your hand. Councillor Fletcher, Carrie McNeil, Brenda Paris.
Raise your hand.
Lawrence D'Souza, Jim Meeks, Councillor Ainsley, Linda Jackson, Warren Law.
Oh, where's Warren? I saw it. Thank you. Thanks very much. That was great. Well done.
Any opposed? That motion is carried. All right, we've come to the end of our time. We're going to have to defer the report on the project status and risks to our next meeting, but I would like to confirm the agenda, the board meeting dates. We need approval for the board meeting dates that have been revised to align with the city's schedule. So may I have a motion to approve? This is item number 23. May I have a motion to approve the revised dates?
So moved, Councillor Ainsley.
Thank you, Councillor Ainsley. Seconder? Who is seconding the motion?
Linda.
Linda, thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. All right, thank you. That takes us to the end of our agenda. I want to.
Sorry, Madam Chair. What are we deferring to the next meeting? What item?
The report on project status and risks. It was originally item number 18. It was for information, and it just gives the summary of where we're at on each of the elements of the transition plan. So I encourage you to review it, but we will have it updated for discussion at our January board meeting.
On a point of order, Madam Chair, can we not just deal with it now? If it's if it's the only item left, can we not just deal with
it? It requires a presentation, so if we can extend our time, yes, there is.
I'll move a motion to extend to finish the agenda.
All right, thank you. Could I have a seconder for that?
Carrie, second.
Carrie, thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Thank you. All right, then can I ask Mary to please provide a brief overview of your report?
I think I can do this very quickly. The report is a status report that goes through the various elements of the project plan. Everything is in green at this time. We have made a separate section in the report that looks at risks. And what we're thinking as a team is that we will raise with the board any risks that may be on our horizon, even if we're not sure yet what exactly the extent of that risk is, because we don't want to have any surprises for the board. So in this case, we raised an issue that we are not yet clear on how we are going to be using TSHC's infrastructure, technical infrastructure, their operating systems, and their payroll system. And all of those things, of course, are critical to the transition. So the fact that we don't yet have that plan in place is a potential risk. As I said earlier, over the last few days, even since this report was created, we have made good progress in a number of these areas. So we're feeling, shall I say, optimistic that we will be able to manage this situation and this will not be a risk. But when we come back in January, we will be able to report if we have a full plan in these very critical areas in place that we're confident about. So I think it's a better situation even than it was a week or so ago when I wrote the report.
Thanks very much, Mary. Any questions for Mary?
Just a quick one on the operational payroll IT.
Yes.
Is there any consideration of having our own? I'm not.
We are in discussions with the payroll provider,
right?
But having actually implemented a new payroll in another startup, I can tell you that it would be very difficult to have a brand new payroll by June 1st. But sure. I think that in the long run, that is definitely something that TSHC might want to consider. It's just, I think, a little unrealistic for June 1st.
I understand. And the IT infrastructure is your
well, we're working with
functioning. Is it functioning on
the TSHC infrastructure in terms of the presentations that we've had from a security point of view and so on is actually quite strong. So the issue is just working with TSHC how the staff of the new corporation will be able to have access to those that secure environment.